Here's an example where they want us to, they're giving us a graph to start with, and they say for the graph above, find the function of the form a tan bx, where a is -1 or +1 only. So they're saying this is some kind of a tangent graph. It's of the form a tan bx. We want you to find basically the a and the b. So how do we do that? Well, first off, remember I've got the notes here, working backwards from a tangent graph to find the equation. So how do you do it? Well, you got the general form, and you got to kind of match things up, and they're using different letters. So let's write the general form first off. Well, actually, let me say this. Let's start with the a. You know what the a is. A is negative, and what does that mean? A is -1. Oh, I already said that, huh? So that means the thing in the front is telling us whether the graph goes up or down, doesn't it? The negative in the front. Let me just go back to it. So the fact that this graph is going up to the right, up to the right, up, all these are going up to the right. So up to the right, so that means the a is positive, the a in the front. And they told us it's either -1 or +1, so it must be +1. So far, we have the equation is +1 tangent bx. All we need now is the b. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, if you look back at the notes, the b, see, where do we have it down here? It's all about the period. The period is pi over b. So let's go back, and the period formula is pi over b. So how do we find b? Or sorry, how do we find the period? What is the period again? It's how far from one cycle to the next. It's how far from one cycle to the next. That's a little tricky to see, isn't it? How far is it from one cycle to the next? Can you tell what it's about to write right there? Gonna have to see, this is pi. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 steps to pi. 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. This must be 2 pi, huh? And that must be right where it hits. So from there to there, that's the period. That's how far from one cycle to the next. That's the width of a whole cycle. How far between cycles? 2 pi. Period's 2 pi. So then let's come on down here. The period, 2 pi equals pi over b. And then we can solve that by cross multiplying. Put this over 1, diagonal. So we get 2 pi times b is 1 times pi. Right? So 2 pi b is pi. Let me bring that down here. 2 pi b is pi. Divide both sides by 2 pi because we're trying to find b. And so b must cancel the pi's. B must be 1/2. So we found it. How did we find it? We looked on the graph, we found the period. How far from one cycle to the next? We could tell it was 2 pi. Then we used the formula. The period is always pi over b. Remember, for sine and cosine, the formula was 2 pi over b. But for tangent, it's just pi over b. So I wrote period, which we knew was 2 pi from the graph, is pi over b, cross multiplied, solve for b, b is 1/2. So now we have the equation. We know that b is 1/2. We know that a is 1, so this must be equal to 1 tangent 1/2 x. That must be the formula for that tangent.